Reality. There's lots of realities that ended up emerging in Manchester City's win over Fluminense in convincing manner, 4-0. I mean, it took 40 seconds to open the scoring, so that tells you all you need to know in terms of who the superior team was. Yes, Fluminense, within the context of South American football, within the context of Brazilian football, end up being uh, maybe not a big club. Historically, they do have history in terms of Brazilian football. They might not be considered a huge club compared to, let's say, Flamengo or Corinthians or Palmeiras. And they might not have the payroll of a Flamengo or a Palmeiras, to be quite honest with you. But they are part of a league that has been the hegemony in terms of South American football. Brazil now has won 5 consecutive Copa Libertadores. They have been in at least the final. I think it's something in 21 out of or 22 out of the last 32 editions of the Copa Libertadores. There's been a Brazilian team involved. So that shows you exactly where it's been. But it's also the economic reality of Brazil compared to the rest of South America. Now, there's an even greater leap, but maybe just as wide a leap or as vast a leap as the Atlantic Ocean itself when you start talking about Fluminense and Brazilian football and Manchester City. That's another story. That's another issue. That's another reality that needs to be addressed. There was a lot of talk in Brazilian media as to how will Fluminense compete against Manchester City. It was funny because I was watching I ended up watching the global feed of the Club World Cup final, and one of the pundits was asked, "Well, what do you think? What are the chances of Fluminense winning?" And he goes and says, "Well, I'm not too optimistic. It's 95-5 in favor of Manchester City." The pundits in the studio end up saying, "Well, man, that's pretty negative. Okay, fine, I'll be more optimistic. 85-15." That basically was the notion and the way that it was being seen because of the spending power, because of the personnel, because of what City has been able to do, and of course the difference between European sides and South American sides. There's a vast difference, and you saw it on the pitch in Saudi Arabia just a little while ago. It is the reality that European clubs are superior to that of South American clubs for a variety of reasons. But yet at the same time, it's those same European clubs that are always poaching away the best South American talent to be able to strengthen their teams and be able to make a difference. Case in point today, the man of the match, Julian Alvarez. Of course, comes from River Plate. They pay Boku bucks to be able to bring in, well, I guess Boku bucks now that you're thinking about it, but then you look at the investment and maybe they didn't pay enough to a certain extent what they ended up paying to River. And, if you end up seeing what City paid for Julian Alvarez and what Chelsea ended up paying for Enzo Fernandez, you end up saying, wow, pretty much a bargain. And it has been. And you could say that Julian Alvarez maybe is one of the most underrated players in world football, maybe. Because no Kevin De Bruyne, no Erling Haaland, no problem for Pep Guardiola and company. He ends up taking over, and he plays in so many different positions and can be able to consolidate in so many different facets of play that he ends up being maybe just as vital. Maybe people are going to criticize me for just as vital, or maybe even more vital than Haaland himself. Yes, of course, Alvarez doesn't play all the time, but when he does play, he has a major impact. Let's not deny that. And today, he ended up playing and he ended up making a major impact for Manchester City as they're able to do it. Not only that, he becomes, now again, I could be wrong and I might have missed somebody along the way. He becomes the first Argentine, the third player overall in history, Cafu and Dida, the other two, to win Club World Cup, to win the World Cup, to win Champions League, Libertadores, and Copa America. Only two players have done that before. He becomes the third and becomes the first Argentine to do so at 23 years of age. So if you look at it, yeah, maybe it is a bargain. Maybe it is peanuts that they paid for the native of Cordoba. But all this being said, all this being kind of looked at, there is a huge difference between South American clubs and European clubs. And now, the teams that have been able to reach the Club World Cup have been the best of South America from a financial and from a football standpoint over the past 5 years. That's been the reality. That is the true reality of it. Maybe we can even add River Plate in 2018. Yeah, you could, because they were the best team in South America that year. Gremio too in 2017, so let's add them as well. So over the past few years, that has been the case. That has been very prevalent. But the money ends up being the big difference. And that's been, and sometimes in these years, South American teams haven't even gotten to the final. Okay, Atlético Nacional in 2016, River Plate, after beating Boca, didn't get to the Club World Cup final. They lost to Alain. Palmeiras a few years ago ended up losing to Tigres. There's been teams that have not got. Flamengo a couple of seasons ago ended up not getting to the final as well. So there's all of that has to be considered when you're analyzing the difference between South American teams and European sides. Now, the other reality, which is what we were just talking about right now. Yes, European and South American teams, there's a vast difference, but you're also seeing a difference between South American national teams and European ones. Mostly, of course, the ones that are raising their hands are Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay, the usual suspects, as they face the best of Europe, and they've been able to handle them relatively well over the past few years. We'll see how that ends up playing out. Now, of course, in Brazil's case, you can say, well, but they lost to Croatia. Yeah, but they've also been able to handle most European sides for well over a decade. Most. I didn't say all, because, of course, we can always bring back 7-1. We can always bring back the loss to the Dutch. We can also bring back when they lost to Belgium. But for the most part, they've been the ones that have raised their hands and represented and have been able to compete at a very high level and stay toe-to-toe with some of the best in Europe. Argentina, we all already know what they've been able to do over the last now 2 years and what they've been able to establish and accomplish and looking to continue establishing and accomplishing going towards the future. Uruguay, they're raising their hand as well. They have raised their hand in the past. We have to see where it ends up going with Marcelo Bielsa. So maybe when you start saying Uruguay, the jury's out on that. But the reality is, you look at those players on those national teams, and they end up being either major role players on European sides, or they are the difference makers on those European sides. So again, like I say, Europe, yes, from a club level, but the South Americans are the ones that end up making the difference of putting a team over the top. Whether you like it or not, that's the reality, and we saw it front and center in this Club World Cup.